When you hear about Iran's internal politics, you likely assume the supreme leader holds absolute command. But recent analysis suggests that assumption is no longer true. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has quietly seized wartime power, effectively blunting the supreme leader's authority without firing a single shot. By understanding this shift, you will see how economic dominance has replaced ideological hierarchy, creating a regime where the guards can veto strategic directives during crises. This is not a story of rebellion, but of structural inevitability. To understand how this happened, we must first look at the foundation of the Islamic Republic itself. The 1979 revolution was not merely a change of government. It was a profound institutional rupture that fundamentally altered the trajectory of the nation. Research utilizing synthetic control methods confirms that the revolution caused a persistent divergence in economic performance and institutional quality compared to counterfactual trajectories. The country entered a lost decade of scientific stagnation, accumulating a knowledge deficit of over 500,000 publications by 2024. This was not a temporary setback, but a permanent structural break that reshaped every aspect of the state. The revolution created a vacuum of legitimacy that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, often called the IRGC, was uniquely positioned to fill. Originally established as a revolutionary militia to protect the new regime from external and internal threats, the Guards evolved into a dominant wartime economic and security apparatus. They did not just become a military force, they became the state within the state. Today, the IRGC controls approximately 40% of Iran's gross domestic product. This is not a minor economic stake. This level of financial dominance grants the Guards the power to veto the supreme leader's strategic directives during wartime without ever needing to fire a shot. Here is the critical distinction that changes how we view the regime. In a traditional hierarchy, the supreme leader sits at the apex, issuing orders that flow down through the chain of command. But the current power structure relies on a decentralized hacker hierarchy that leverages universities and private contractors to bypass traditional state channels. This creates a parallel command structure that operates with significant autonomy from the central religious authority. When a crisis emerges, the Guards do not wait for a decree. They mobilize their own resources, coordinate their own strikes, and deploy their own assets based on their own assessment of the situation. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. This shift explains why Iran's wartime power structure is so resilient, yet so fragmented. The IRGC prioritizes military-industrial resilience over the institutional reforms the supreme leader might otherwise pursue. Because the Guards control the economy, they can fund their own operations independently. They can bypass the central treasury and allocate resources directly to their preferred projects. This means that during a conflict, the supreme leader's ability to escalate or de-escalate is severely constrained. The Guards have become the sole arbiter of operational tempo on the ground, often acting before the supreme leader can issue a formal directive. The consequences of this fragmentation are visible in Iran's approach to foreign policy and digital sovereignty. Aggressive cyber retaliation against United States tech firms and sabotage of global infrastructure are increasingly driven by IRGC-affiliated units rather than centralized state directives. This indicates a fragmentation of the supreme leader's monopoly on foreign policy aggression. The regime is no longer a monolith issuing unified commands. It is a collection of powerful factions, with the Guards holding the most significant leverage. Consider the operational reality of this dynamic. Real-time conflict monitoring reveals a shift in Iran's behavior where the Guards coordinate independent military strikes and asset deployments. They do not seek permission for every action. Instead, they act on the assumption that their economic power grants them the right to define the national interest during wartime. This creates a situation where the supreme leader's role is reduced to that of a figurehead who must ratify decisions already made by the Guards. The ideological hierarchy that once defined the regime has been supplanted by an economic primacy that rewards the most powerful faction with the most power. This evolution is not accidental. It is the logical outcome of the structural break caused by the revolution. The long-term divergence in economic performance and the loss of scientific output created a system where the state could not function without the IRGC. The regime needed the guards to survive, and in doing so, it empowered them to a degree that threatened its own central authority. The supreme leader remains the ultimate symbol of the revolution, but the practical power to wage war and manage the economy now rests with the guards. The implications for regional stability are profound. When the supreme leader cannot control the escalation of conflict, the risk of unintended war increases. The guards may pursue aggressive tactics that the supreme leader would prefer to avoid simply because they have the resources to do so. This creates a dangerous dynamic where the most aggressive faction within the regime dictates the pace of conflict. The traditional model of state behavior, where the head of state controls the military, no longer applies to Iran. We are witnessing the emergence of a new type of authoritarianism, one where the military-industrial complex has absorbed the state itself. The IRGC's control over 40% of the economy means that the state's survival is inextricably linked to the guards' success. This creates a powerful incentive for the guards to maintain a state of perpetual conflict or high tension, as their power and legitimacy depend on their role as the defenders of the revolution. The supreme leader's authority is blunted not by a coup, but by the sheer weight of economic necessity. This structural shift explains why diplomatic efforts to constrain Iran often fail. Negotiators may be dealing with the supreme leader, but the actual leverage lies with the guards. Any agreement that does not account for the IRGC's independent power will be ineffective. The regime's internal dynamics are now defined by the tension between the religious authority of the supreme leader and the economic might of the guards. This is the new reality of the Islamic Republic, a reality that has been building for decades since the structural break of 1979. The lesson here is clear. You cannot understand Iran's foreign policy or its internal stability by looking only at the supreme leader. You must look at the economic structures that underpin the regime. The IRGC has become the true center of gravity, the faction that determines the limits of what is possible. The supreme leader remains the face of the revolution, but the power to shape its destiny now lies with the guards. This is the enduring legacy of the revolution, a structural transformation that has fundamentally altered the balance of power within the Islamic Republic. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.